very happy to welcome to the show the Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner and Director of Regulations, Osian Llywelyn. Now, before we start, Osian, educate me in how to pronounce your surname correctly.
You would pronounce it Llywelyn, so the double L at the beginning of my name would be a as opposed to a L.
Llywelyn. Is that it? Llywelyn.
That's right. That's right.
It's fascinating,
Fabulous.
Because you have that kind of indigenous way of pronouncing things here in New Zealand. Obviously, Māori is our indigenous language, and the WH can be an F sound, and unless you're a native speaker, you have no idea. And being a non-native speaker trying to pick up like an indigenous language from the other side of the world is difficult at best. But look, thank you so much for joining me this morning, your time. I'm really interested to find out about how other countries, I don't know if treats their indigenous language, but interacts with, legislates around even their indigenous language, especially if it's a minority language, as we have in New Zealand. What percentage of people in Wales are fluent in Welsh?
Okay, I think there's that's a question that I would answer in two different ways. We have a census, which is published every 10 years, and the last census was published in 2021, and the number of people who identified themselves as Welsh speakers as part of that census was just under 18% of the country. However, that is a self-assessment process in terms of the census, and we also have an annual population survey, and there is the latest results in that population survey back in September of last year, September of 2023. That survey estimated that around 29% of people aged 3 years or over were able to speak Welsh. So there are some discrepancies in terms of the statistics, but I think generally we are looking at around the 20% mark of people who identify as Welsh speakers.
Is the discrepancy between the 18% to the 29%, is that maybe people who use Welsh often and commonly, but maybe aren't fluent? Like, so here in New Zealand, most people use Māori day-to-day language. Like, everyone speaks it, but only maybe 5% are fluent. Could that be the differential between the 19 and the 29?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, there are discrepancies and there are differences in the way that people report their use of the Welsh language, and that can be influenced, I guess, by various factors. That includes, the context in which the question is asked. Sometimes the way that those questions are asked from in terms of the census and other surveys differ, and that will inevitably trigger slightly different responses from people. The perceived importance of the language for individuals, and obviously the way that people identify, I guess, with Welsh culture. Those are, various factors that I guess that can influence that discrepancy.
Gotcha. Now, the Welsh Language Commission has a website, and what I noticed on the website is the Freedom to Use Welsh section. For people who are listening to the audio podcast, it says, if you wish to communicate in Welsh, e.g. when speaking or writing with another individual, you should be able to do so without interference. And it lists a few examples of doing that. That says to me that perhaps there's been a resurgence, a revival of the Welsh language over the last 100 years. Has this been something that Wales has lost and has had to try and find and build back up to where you are today? Or has it always been around at sort of 20-30% of people spoke it?
Well, I guess you referred to the provision there around the freedom to use the Welsh language, and that's certainly a key feature of our current legislation that the Commissioner operates under. That's the Welsh language measure that was passed back in 2011, and that replaced previous pieces of legislation and we've gradually built on existing legislation. We had a piece of legislation back in 1993. The previous Welsh Language Act after that was 1967. So there has been a strengthening of of Welsh language requirements in terms of what public bodies are expected to do in terms of delivering services through the medium of Welsh. And obviously the culmination in 2011, the Welsh language measure not only established that principle, that legislative principle that people have the freedom to communicate with others in Wales through the medium of Welsh, but it also established the Welsh language as an official language, and it has official status in Welsh, therefore.
Is this idea of growing, building, making the Welsh language sort of being able to be used legally, I guess you'd say, a right to use it, is it a political football? Like, are there parties that are sort of English first or think that Welsh is a dead or dying language? Or is everyone in agreement in the kind of Welsh political world?
I think in any democracy there are a range of views. I think certainly from our Senedd, our Welsh Parliament, there is a cross-party consensus in terms of the government's aims to in its strategy for the Welsh language to increase the number of Welsh speakers to a million by 2050, and to increase the daily use of the language. The government has a target to double that from 10% to 20% of the population using Welsh on a daily basis by 2050. And I think, as I said, there is a cross-party consensus and broad support to those aims.
So by cross-party, you mean both what some people would describe as either on the left or the right. They're all in agreement and generally with what Wales is trying to do.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think there's a cross-party consensus to the aims and how we go about that. There may be some different views around various policy areas in relation to the language, but as I say, I think the broad aim of increasing the number of people in Wales who are able to use the language, and that we take proactive steps to increase not only the opportunities that people have to use the Welsh language, whether that's through services with public organisations, but also importantly increasing the daily use of that language here in Wales.
By daily use, is that what I was referring to earlier about, how we use Māori here in New Zealand by just interspersing it? It's almost like a mix of Māori and English. It just gets interspersed with, and everyone kind of uses it, well, most people intersperses Māori words with English. Is that what you mean by daily use, or are you saying fluent speakers daily use?
Well, I think education is a central function to the government's broad aim of reaching a million speakers, and what the government here in Wales wants to see is the education system, people who leave statutory education, that they leave as confident Welsh speakers. Now, there are levels of confidence, but certainly what the government wants is that people are able to feel confidently to use the Welsh language, and that they do that on a daily basis. Now, that will vary from cohort to cohort, but what we want to see is people leaving statutory education as confident Welsh speakers.
Is this the feeling? And I've got you guys had a conference recently, 2024, of the International Association of Language Commissioners. Is this the same sort of objective? Is this the same sort of drive that we're looking on the site now of places in Canada or in Spain or in Kosovo? Et cetera, Ireland's there as well. In fact, Canada's there numerous times. That's interesting. Is it the same kind of feeling you get from all of those same language commissioners? There's a drive to make people use the native language more, and they want to see the use of native language grow more?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, the International Association of Language Commissioners was a really important development, and it's allowed us language commissioners who work, albeit in different contexts, but have ultimately the same aim, which is to promote and facilitate and celebrate the use of our minority and native languages and official languages in our respective countries. It's been a real important development, and it's given us the opportunity to learn from each other, from our own experiences. As I say, we all work in slightly different contexts, whether that's culturally or legislatively. Clearly we have a strong Welsh language piece of legislation, which imposes duties on public bodies to deliver services through the medium of Welsh. And the conference that we had earlier this month, that was the 8th conference that the association has held. That was in Cardiff. It was an opportunity for us to demonstrate and to show how those legislative changes in the last 10 to 15 years has really transformed that agenda in terms of the opportunities that people have to use the language when accessing public services, when using the language in the workplace, for example, but also more broadly in communities across Wales.
As I peruse the members of that association, I noticed New Zealand's not there. Any ideas why that we're not a part of that? Is it on our end that we just haven't signed up, or?
I think it would be wonderful to see representation from New Zealand on our Association of Language Commissioners. We very much welcome new members, whether those are observing members or otherwise. So the more the merrier, and we'd very much welcome representation from your country as part of that association.
I think it's amazing that we've been talking for 10 minutes or so now, a man from Wales and a man from New Zealand, and we haven't talked about rugby once, especially because the All Blacks were just announced today, but we won't go there because I was thinking Cardiff. This made me think about that. If I'm walking through Cardiff and I'm seeing street signs, road signs, school signs, hospital signs, am I seeing Welsh? Am I seeing English? Am I seeing both? How does it work?
You would see both languages on any signs that are displayed publicly, and that is the responsibility of government, local authorities, local health boards. You mentioned schools and education there. There is a statutory legal requirement on any signs that are displayed in public to be bilingual, with an emphasis on the Welsh language appearing first on those signs.
So that's a literal Welsh language first policy as opposed to the reverse.
There is a requirement on public bodies when putting signs up, new signs, and replacing all signs, that those signs have the Welsh language appearing first. But they are bilingual signs. And
sorry to make an absolutely pedantic question. Because this is what's happening in New Zealand a little bit at the moment, the font between the English and the Welsh, is it exactly the same? Is Welsh needs to be a bit bigger than the English? Does that make any difference?
No, I think the regulations that we have in place, which places these legal duties on public bodies, they stipulate that when you do produce bilingual signs, that the Welsh language should be treated no less favourably than the English language, and that's in terms of font size, etc. So they are equal in that sense.
Is this conversation kind of a bit weird to you? Because the reason I'm asking these questions is we've had a government that's come in recently who is doing the opposite. They're literally saying English first on signs. They're renaming some of our government institutions to have the English name first. And that's why I'm, as a podcaster and journalist, kind of going, is it just us? Is it just this political party? Or is this what's happening around the world? Which is why I'm wanting to speak to guys like you. What would happen in Wales if a political party, ardently stood up and said, English will be first, English will have priority on road signs in government departments? Would that get traction amongst society or not?
No, I don't think that's the case. As I said, in any democracy, there will be a wide range of views. But I think, broadly speaking, I think the people of Wales are supportive of the Welsh language and the ambitions and the aims of government, but also other key stakeholders who have a keen interest in the Welsh language, most notably ourselves as the Welsh Language Commissioner. There is broad support for the promotion of the Welsh language, and bilingual signs and things like that are key features of that agenda.
I know this is probably, someone comes to New Zealand, they go, oh, where's Lord of the Rings? And it gets really tiring after a while. And I'm sure this is the same for you guys, but I love watching Welcome to Rexam on whatever channel it's on. And the explanation, like they talk about The Welsh word for the corner store, the English word is the corner store, the American word is the 7-Eleven. I love that. And I think that's just, and I know that's not to do with legislation or anything, but just to see that, it fills me with kind of, oh, that's such a nice way to show how the culture that they're showing through on that docuseries is actually unique to that country. And it's one of the things within that country that you'll only get in that country. So why wouldn't you want to highlight it? It's fantastic.
Yeah, I have to confess that I haven't seen the Welcome to Wrexham series. As a Swansea City fan, another club in Wales, my interest in Wrexham is perhaps not as high as those in North Wales. But it's a fantastic platform, isn't it? And Wrexham, we had a visit from Taylor Swift to Cardiff last week. She was performing in the Principality Stadium here in Cardiff and used the Welsh language to converse with the audience, and that those sorts of things are real positives in our efforts to promote the language and to mainstream the language and to make it a living language. And I'm conscious of the efforts that Wrexham Football Club are doing to actively promote the language in their own communities as well, but also on platforms like Netflix, that brings the language to a significantly wider audience, doesn't it?
Definitely. Hey, as your involvement with the Association of Language Commissioners, which means you get a chance to peruse the world on some level when it comes to Indigenous languages, native languages in different countries, do you have any opinion on why it feels like places like Australia, USA, and New Zealand, there is a vibe, there is an underground vibe which has enough popularity that it can be put into legislation through a political aspect as to wanting to literally squash and suppress our native languages? Do you have any thoughts around that? Have you seen anything that could explain that?
Oh, that's a difficult question and perhaps a slightly political one. I certainly think, we here in Wales are part of a broader United Kingdom, and clearly English is the dominant language, sure, if you like. And I mentioned earlier some of the journey that we've been on in terms of legislation. The current legislation we have from 2011, previous pieces of legislation which aimed to address and redress perhaps some of the historical consequences as to why the Welsh language was indeed a minority language and spoken by, we saw continuous decrease in the use of the Welsh language over the course of history. So there has been, sustained efforts from governments both at a UK level and post-devolution here in Wales to redress that, and as I say, to promote and facilitate the use of the Welsh language. We've seen a huge rise in Welsh medium education, for example. There are requirements on local authorities to proactively promote Welsh medium education amongst their citizens. We've got a Welsh language education bill that is going to be laid in front of our Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, later this summer, and we hope that will become law by the end of 2026. So there are steps taken by government, certainly here in Wales, over the course of the last 50 years to strengthen Welsh language requirements, impose duties on public bodies, but also that broader agenda of promoting and facilitating the use of the language and making that language certainly a more visible one here in Wales, which again is a response, I guess, to our history as a nation.
I had one other question, but just that you've said, as you've just said, that it makes me think, what does it add to a country to actually embrace its Indigenous language?
Well, I think the people of Wales, we recognise that we are a bilingual nation. We are a nation, we're a bilingual nation, but there are other languages that are spoken in Wales, but there are 2 official languages here in Wales, and it's important that we celebrate the language. The language is an inherent part of our nation's culture. And I think it's important that not only do we recognize that, in legal terms, but also in broader terms, but that we celebrate that. And I think, the work that the International Association of Language Commissioners, for example, do, we learn from our experiences in various jurisdictions, but it's also an opportunity for us to celebrate the successes in respective jurisdictions. So I think it's really important that we embrace our culture, that we celebrate it, and that we give people the opportunities to use that language.
Last question, if you will like to play a game with me. And the game is, imagine you've finished working for the Welsh Language Commissioner and you're now out consulting to other countries as to why they should embrace their indigenous languages. Here in New Zealand, we have a government at the moment who, it's not that they're not embracing it, but they're making sure that English comes first. What advice would you give to them in this split parallel multiverse as to why they should perhaps think about embracing our Māori language, or perhaps whatever country it is, their indigenous language, more heartily?
Well, I think, from our experience, look back to 2011, we're 15 years into this piece of legislation. And I think from our experience, we've seen a real step change in terms of the way that organisations deliver services through the medium of Welsh. And what that has meant is that the people here in Wales have more opportunities to use the Welsh language when they access services. They can see the Welsh language, whether that's on signs. They are able to access websites from public bodies. They are able to use the language in their everyday lives. And I think that's been we've seen a real step change in that sense. And as I said, I go back to the point I was making in response to your earlier question. I think it's really important that, any government reflects the culture and the values of that country, and language is an inherent part of that culture. So I think, it's important for any government to take proactive steps to promote minority official indigenous languages.
The Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner and Director of Regulations, Osian, help me again, because I'm going to say Llywelyn. Give me one more lesson before we wrap up.
Osian Llywelyn.
Llywelyn.
Fabulous.
That's okay.
Fantastic.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I've really, really appreciated your insights.
Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn.